Okay, thanks for joining us. Our next presentation will be by Varun Singh, PhD, founder and CEO of CallStats. Studied in telecommunications and media in his PhD, and also a contributor to WebRTC, ORTC, Quick Standards, among others, and definitely a thought leader in quality around WebRTC calls. So very pleased to have him here today to speak to us about quality in the contact center. So thank you, Varun.
Thank you for having me here, Aaron. So this talk is unlike any that I've given before because this doesn't have any solutions. This just has questions I've been pondering over the last year. And especially this is, probably if I'd given this talk last year, it would have been too early. So this is something that I've been grappling for the last 18 months. And it's interesting because over the last 2-3 years, we've seen the emergence of WebRTC in call centers, right? So Amazon Connected announced a product 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Flex came out in spring 2018. And last year, towards the end of the year, like everyone went into a buying frenzy. Like there was a major consolidation of products and features across the industry. So Vonage bought New Voice Media and TalkBox to like go with their Nexmo platform, and there were other people like RingCentral and 8x8 and went out and acquired more call centers. So over the last year we've been actually looking at this phenomenon, and we've been saying like when we started the company CallStats, we were like, hey, you know, everyone asked us like it has call in its name, but do you do call centers? And we said no, actually no. Because call centers are an archaic technology, and integrating into something that's archaic is not what we want to do. We want to like move with companies which are in the new world. I mean, like when we started in 2011-12, a lot of people were doing call centers were not in the cloud. They were like PBX. They were in the basement of large vendors, and if it was in the cloud, it was in their own cloud, which meant that like if CallStats needed to integrate into something like that, it would have to be like an on-prem solution as opposed to a cloud solution, which it is today. So a little bit about us. We started in 2014. As Aaron said, we've authored several documents in the IETF and the W3C. We've integrated with major CPaaS platforms. We started with team collaboration and went into like what I call two-sided marketplaces like healthcare, education, language learning, so on and so forth. So a lot of apps in that area. But we've always looked at call centers and always pondered how we could get in, right? And having written so many RTCP extensions, one would imagine that I would go out and write something that would parse those RTCP metrics from the RTCP messages and send it to CallStats. And I actually wrote a very early prototype in 2011 called ConMon. You can go and look at it on GitHub, which looks at, it's a PCAP. It's a glorified PCAP tracer, which sends data to a middle, like from the middle box out into the cloud. But it was really hard to do that at scale, because if you want to do something like that, you need to capture it at line rates. And then it gets into other problems of like getting there. So with contact centers moving to the cloud, I think it's an interesting opportunity for us, because today, depending on who you listen to, like market analysts, like Gartner, or you look at like Twilios and the Amazons, or like Five9s, the contact center market as a whole, on-prem, not on-prem, on cloud, is about $20 to $24 billion, right? And that's significant. And this year, Gartner proposed that almost 15% of the contact center market has moved to the cloud, right? And actually announced that they're going to stop tracking in the Magic Quadrant any of the old legacy providers, right? And so that basically means that more and more people are going to come on to the cloud-based contact centers, and the old on-prem stuff is kind of dead. And when I say cloud, it may be run by them, it may be run by someone else. That's that's up to debate. But it basically means that it's not running in someone's basement anymore, right? And what they speculate over the next 4 or 5 years is that the 24 billion market will become 31 billion, and the share of the cloud-based stuff is going to increase dramatically. So it's going to grow faster. And that's because the end of life for many of these customers is in 20 years. So those people who started transitioning to the cloud early was like as early as 2012. So there may be a 10, 15 years before like this thing completely transitions, which is about 8 years from now. So by the end of 2025, we'll start to see like this numbers like go to 50% and then go on forward. So what does that mean? Like on-premise providers, we think of things like Avaya, Cisco, Genesys. Of course, they also are coming up with the cloud offering. So this slide is probably already outdated. But that's when we talk to customers and when they talk about on-prem, those are the people they're talking about. And when we're talking about disruptors, we're talking about like the 8x8s, the RingCentrals, Talkdesk, Five9s. There are a lot more than the 6 that I've listed there. Those are the ones that come top of mind when we're talking about it. And of course, a lot of that is based on technologies like FreeSwitch or similar. So some open source things that they're rolling themselves in or they're building their own. But one of the major things that we're seeing is the reason why people are moving to cloud contact centers is the flexibility and ease of use, but also how quickly they can rapidly deploy. So in the past, when they were thinking of building call centers, they tend to be like large locations, like where they would invest a lot of resources. So think of like if someone wants 1,000 people in a call center, they would split it over 2 or 3 locations and put 300 people in one location, right? Physical location. That's a building which has like fiber or something coming to the basement. There's a PBX or something, and then they're basically wiring up the whole building to like house these people who are going to make either outbound or inbound calls. But with the cloud-based thing, the question becomes like, you're not doing that. You're basically the cloud, the thing in your basement's moved to the cloud, right? So you can now have people you don't have to wire up a physical location. They can work from home or they can work from a smaller site. So like there's a big transition from, especially like in the US, people are moving to smaller cities in the Midwest where they don't have to like move people into a big building. They can just work from like smaller places. And we're seeing this happen already. Like call centers are becoming smaller. The smallest that we've seen is like 20, 30 people. And the biggest we've seen is like 300, 400 people. And we're talking about call centers which house, or the organization houses at least about 1,000 to 10,000 people. So in 1,000 organization of call centers is like at 50 or 100. So you're thinking of microsites as opposed to like a large site. And there's a lot of movement because there's remote work happening. There are a lot of other social reasons for this to happen. Like people say like they don't want to commute. People want to like have more control over their time, as in they're already getting that with Uber and other things. So there's a lot of movement, tension towards like people figuring out how to work in these locations. But like the consequence of all this is that if things are moving to the cloud, all the old tools that they had are not usable anymore, right? So like, for example, they would do something like least cost routing, which means that if you had a call center with about 500 people, they would buy one or two, they would go to one or two ISPs and get an SLA from one or both of them, and then basically switch between them and pay for use, right? So like if one is performing better than the other, they would do like base price, but then usage would go on to the other. But this is basically the IT admins at the site would have full control over this. But you move this to the cloud, this thing does not have any meaning because the cloud is in Amazon and you're basically trying to figure out what is your best way to Amazon, which was not what they intended to do. So in the end, you realize that you're spending a lot of money for which don't get any of the benefit. And the other thing is things like Amazon and Twilio do not provide any SLAs. So you're still stuck with the old problem in a new, summarized as a new problem, but you don't have any of the tools for it today. But why is, so I'm going to harp a little bit on quality because that's what I care a lot about. And one of the things that we've seen is that when we're building applications, like everyone, if you talk to anyone, they'll say like they care about quality. But we've seen that with call centers specifically, they care a lot more about quality because the call center agent is working in a call center, has a bad experience, is going to be a lot more vociferous in the fact that they're not getting good quality as opposed to like someone paying you for your service. Because these people would be like, hey, I'm not able to do my job. I'm supposed to get paid. And they're operational people in the company who are trying to figure out how to reduce churn because these agents will leave. right? So there's a lot more emphasis on quality, and here I mean quality as an umbrella term. There's network quality, there's device quality, there is quality of the script, like talking to the right. So it covers a lot of the spectrum. So there are three things. We basically figured that there are three types of things they want to draw. Poor quality affects customer experience because the person who called in, if they're not able to talk to the agent, they're unhappy. IT teams have trouble resolving these issues because they actually don't know where the problem is anymore. Because it's not the IT, it's not something that was in their basement where they would say like everything outside the basement works. Everything inside the basement and upwards into my site is crappy. And if it was outside, outside the basement, they would call up the ISP and say like, what happened to my SLA? Like I'm paying you for it. Right, and the third one is what I was talking about is if the agent's unhappy, they're probably going to like either leave or you would fire them or one of the others would happen. So building blocks, you want rapid problem detection, you want to reduce time to resolution in these cases, you want to avoid these network problems that may be happening, you want to monitor SLA even if they're not guaranteed, and you want to coordinate problem response. So like if one person's having a problem, you want to build some checklists, you want to like figure out if this happens again, how people can figure this out by themselves without escalating it to an engineering person or an operations person. And then the third part is like how do you proactively analyze and plan? Like for example, if more and more people work from home, like how do you understand like the quality of experience may actually vary compared to what you had at a physical site where, especially like with the third space, like they call office, home, and then the third space where people work from is like a Starbucks or something similar, right? Like my experience over the last month and a half is that I work from, like I'm living in an Airbnb in San Francisco. I work from WeWork. And both of these places suck at the moment. Like my call quality in both those places is terrible. And I try to tether off T-Mobile, which routinely has only 2 bars anywhere in San Francisco, which means like I just struggle with call quality issues where they're either equipment or the last mile. I know all the issues are at my end, and I just don't know how to solve it, right? So trying to figure that out, even as a person who runs a company like this, and I can see all this, is like super, super hard. So when we talk about measuring quality today, they want to know, like for example, the operations people want to know, like our agents report issues. We want to know if these are legitimate issues, right? Like a lot of the times, especially like for example, if you're calling from a PSTN, you're doing G711 that gets transcoded to Opus, and like all the packet loss that happened on the PSTN side just completely disappeared. So Opus seems like, oh, it's awesome because you don't see any packet loss anymore. But you already had like 2% packet loss coming in, so there's nothing that you could do, but there's no way to detect it. So it becomes interesting, like, how do you build a model when like none of the statistics are showing that? And the question then becomes like, okay, if there is packet loss or what can we do about it? Like, how do I make sure we don't encounter this problem? One is measuring. The second part of it is predicting, right? So for example, if you're measuring something and you see this problem happen again and again, then the question is like, how do you make sure that, like, can you say this will happen again? And if it's going to happen again, then there are things that you could do. Like for example, I work from my WeWork place, and it's routinely, I can train myself if if the dialer or application that I'm using keeps telling me that I have bad network, I would stop going to that location. Right, like that's one way of telling you that this is like a bad location to be in. Like we've seen this happen multiple times. Now, how do you express that? Like on an API level, it's fairly easy, but how do you build that into an application is an interesting aspect. Like how do you tell the agent or the user that do not make a call from here, it's going to suck, right? And this is not necessarily a call center problem, but of course in the call center, the value of this solution is a lot more higher than, like, for example, if you're building a productivity app and the same thing were to happen there. Because these people make like 40, 50 calls a day, so they want to make sure that once they're in a location, they're able to do that. Otherwise, they need to move to a new location, that's an hour spent. And that comes to be the second thing, right? So whenever you have bad quality in a call center, like if it affects one or more agent, it affects the operational productivity of the call center. So this may happen because, like, wait times will increase. So if you have 10,000 agents available and 20% of them suddenly disappear, you now have 8,000 agents, and you had like basically catered for 10,000 for some reason. So like maybe that was to reduce your wait times from like 2 minutes to 1 minute, and now you suddenly 20% goes away because of bad quality or whatever, and that 1 minute SLA that you wanted to have on the wait times like suddenly increased to 1 minute 30. So on one hand, on the operational side, the call center is like trying to solve the problem like by staffing. On the other hand, quality of experience is directly like affecting their productivity. So how do they, like, can we predict that so that if you know that 20% are going to be away, maybe you cater for 20%. And given this is a very dynamic changing environment where we actually do not know where people may work from, like they may work from home, they may work from somewhere else. So you need to figure out how do you get more people into the call center, or so it's like spot pricing for like Uber, like, you know, you get people in like at 2x surge because you have like wait times increasing, you get people from somewhere else. I mean, I'm spinballing ideas, so there are like things that we can think about now where you could use these metrics to figure out how to effectively get people into the call center. And then overall, like basically want to figure out the agent productivity as a workflow. So there are agents, there are supervisors who manage those agents, there are floor or site managers which manage those supervisors. So like there's a whole story that you can build where quality transcends like not just one person, but across that whole reporting chain. Because agents are looking only at their productivity, supervisors are looking at a productivity across agents, and this may be like, for example, you call like a supervisor might be managing one or more like a credit card cancellation and route, right? So like, for example, you dial a 1-800 number and you say like, hey, I lost my credit card, I want to cancel it. And if you're a premium customer, you jump to the front of the line, right? And when you're a premium customer, you want to be routed to the right person, but also to the best person who has the quality of like good network quality. If they don't, you route it, then it doesn't matter if you're a platinum customer, you just have a bad experience, right? So you need to like trade off all these routing decisions. So quality becomes a more intrinsic part of this. So how would it work? I think one thing that I'm basically coming to is that quality becomes like a unit metric that we need to understand and like not necessarily standardize, but understand it at a level where it can be used across multiple decision-making vectors. So one is to figure out if you measure quality of an agent and it sucks, we can't just say it sucks. We have to say like a little bit more about it. Like we have to say if that problem is local device or network, is it outside that network, and if it's the remote entity at the very least. And if we can provide more data on that, that would be, for each of these things would be even more useful. Next one would be what could people do with this, right? So one thing would be to talk about is this happening at the site, like use historical evidence of their own behavior to make that decision. So for example, you go to a particular coffee shop and like its quality is declining over time, then you would be able to present that data in a way to the agent to make that decision so that they either stop coming or realize that this is going to be a bad experience and find an alternative. So that's the thing, train people or do it automatically. And of course, our thesis is that we can help with this. Other things that we could do, if people have bad experience, we could take them offline. But as I said before, like taking people offline has a consequence that the wait times increase. So then it becomes like a very good, like a trade-off between like, do you want to have slightly bad experience or slightly bad wait times, right? Or you get spot pricing and get people through the door. And we're very, very far from like people getting onto a call center and saying, I'm going to answer your questions. It requires a lot more training and so on and so forth. So basically what we're looking at right now is on one side, the call centers do not like surprises in agent productivity. They want to know if someone's able to do very deterministic. And that's why they like the call center at a physical location, brick and mortar, thousands of people came in. they made sure that all those 1,000 people performed at a particular quality of experience. Now, moving to the cloud and moving to work from home, that control environment is kind of lost. So new world, we need to rethink how we make this happen. Then it becomes like, how could we forecast this thing? So it becomes like, how do we know where you're going to be? Can you tell us? Or, can we tell you, like, if you say, like, I want to go to these locations, what my quality of experience are going to be like? So you either make it reactive, active, proactive, right? So either you have some workforce optimization tools or workforce management tools where people say, I'm going to work from home, I'm going to work from these locations. And then we can predict based on like whatever they said, right? So like, for example, I'm in Chicago this week. Then I would say, like, I'm in Chicago and I'm going to take my calls from here. Either it's work from home, and they would say, like, oh, Chicago generally has these areas and these places are known to be good, or these places are good. So it's like a route map or something where you would get like a global index of location and quality. You go out and figure that out by yourself. And the last one would be like, how would it all work, right? What will call centers do with this predictions? Capacity planning, is there more that they can do here? Like the whole idea here is like, how do we make this transition to cloud-based contact centers easier, faster, better? And what I'm looking at is figuring this out through some workflows. So in the case of contact centers, we're looking at operators, and they're looking at questions like, what sites are experiencing issues? What are those issues? Are they network? Are they, so like looking at from a very operational perspective. Then triage, like slice and dice that data, automate based on rules. So like basically say, okay, I'm going to make this rule, and then the question becomes, what is the impact of that rule? Is that rule very helpful or not? And that's very operational specific. We've done that for other things. We can apply that here. And then the other thing is like looking at supervisors. Can we build tools which are not for engineering folks? Can we build an engineering product or engineering-based data product which can help non-engineers make decisions? And lastly, of course, the agents themselves. Like I think it's a bit sad that over the last 25 years or 30 years, internet's proliferated everywhere, but the tools for debugging even my own internet connection just kind of suck. I just give up at some point, and like I just say, like, okay, I just go sit somewhere else. And so like the question becomes like, can we give these people superpowers, right? Like basically that's the narrative that we want to go for. Like what can we provide to the agents themselves or users that would help them make those decisions? And the question is like, how do they understand like the decision that they made in a different context, like, and what a context means? Like I work from a Starbucks versus I work from home, where I work from a different Starbucks. Like how do I carry that information from one place to another? And I'm giving an example of geography, but that necessarily does not follow, because sometimes I may be on a Wi-Fi, I could be on a 3G tethering, right? And all this has to be taken into account, because you may have bad Wi-Fi at a Starbucks, you could just tether through mobile, which again changes that context. So I think that's the place where we're looking to. These are the problems that I think we are seeing every day, and I'm pondering about solutions in this area. And just to give you a sense of like, what are the proof points? These are not just made up. This is my last slide. So we've seen like some examples of this already appear across. As you can see, we have 3 companies which are providing these kind of like good testimonies. But like the question is like, how do we improve customer experience? How do we reduce the contact center agent downtime? How do we increase operational efficiency? And as I said, this talk was different from my previous ones where we talked about solutions. I had more questions this time. So with that, that's my last slide. I'll leave it open. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Although since I asked a lot of questions, I'm hoping someone has the answers.
So So the question that I have is, you said the call center are moving to like cloud-based, right? So is there any like security measures that is put into place to prevent like, phone number being like out to like, the people that keep calling or like, you know what I mean?
Oh, you mean spam?
Yeah, those
Yeah,
spam
that's
calls.
I think call centers, how they get phone numbers and how they dial out is like outside the scope of it. But there are definitely ongoing work, like stir and shake and trying to figure out if the bad actors can be weeded out. I think the bigger problem is that when people say like, I'm company X, and it turns out that they're not company X. I think that's the bigger problem than if company X calls you up and you say, you're spam calling me. I think that's an easier problem to fix, but it's more like people masquerading as other companies. I think that's the bigger problem. And my framework doesn't take that into account. We're looking at specifically that people who are working in those call centers that are I'm assuming there are legitimate reasons for them to call people up or receive calls for support, for example, that they're able to do the best to their ability.
Okay, well, one last quick question.
So, Varun, do you actually intercept the RTCP packets and then secure RTCP packets, or?
No, so the way we went around that whole problem was like integrate ourselves right into the application. Okay. So at the point of generating those RTP or RTCP packets, we have an API, either through JavaScript or native code or similar, both at the endpoints and in the middle boxes, which manage those things. Okay. To capture that and report it. So there's something called WebRTC statistics API, which reports that.
And this is secured RTCP, right? So you probably need the keys to encrypt those.
No, so this is before they encrypt it and after they decrypt it. So so the application trusts us natively to send us that data. If they do not trust us, they would not integrate it. Correct. Hence, they would not give us the data.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Varun. You've asked a lot of great questions and given me a lot of questions to ask now, too. So this was very thought-provoking. I appreciate it. Let's have a round of applause for Varun.
Thank you.